Today we are doing another special here on Subtropical Gardening Magazine. Our feature plant is this beautiful kind of native. It is known as the Leptospermum Pink Cascade. Today in Subtropical Gardening, which is our weekly podcast, I will be talking about a little bit about the plant, how to grow it, how to improve its flowering, a little bit about its history, why I grow it, and why I encourage you all to grow it as well. So first off, my name is Paul Plant. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. It is only a relatively new weekly podcast. We are starting, and I am starting, and hopefully, I will get more people tuning in and participating with live questions, etc. I've got a couple of questions which came in late last week, so I will address those a little bit later. Now, moving on directly to the plant in question. So this is Leptospermum Pink Cascade. It gets its name because of the abundant, let's see if I can make it stop swinging in the camera, abundant pink flowers in the autumn winter period. And stop. There you go. This plant right now in late May, early June is in full bloom absolutely everywhere. It is a gorgeous, stunning plant when in flower. There are other relatives to it, but this one today is the one I am featuring. So Pink Cascade is a hybrid between two particular plants. There is debate as to its parentage, but from the best of the research that we know, this plant is from the Leptospermum polygallifolium, which we commonly call the jelly bean or jelly bush here in Australia, and it's also known as the narrow-leaf tea tree. Now, this one is native to the mainland of Australia. It is probably more commonly seen as pure white, which is where it probably gets part of its parentage and its flowering feature from. Polygallifolium also has a slightly weeping habit, which is the characteristic for the pink cascade component of its name. Now, the other parent, apparently in the breeding, is what is it? Leptospermum scoparium. Now, that one is native to New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, and New Zealand. And over in New Zealand, it is known as Manuka. You know that name, Manuka honey? So it has that correlation there with it. Now, the Manuka or the Leptospermum scoparium is naturally white in the form of its parentage, but also you can get different colors of that one as well. Luckily, breeders have been selecting varieties and breeding in colors. A lot of the marketed leptospermums have been hybrids between different species or selections to get those color spectrums. Now, I should say a little bit about its origin. Based on the information I can track down, it appears to be originated from the Ryton Nursery in Bangalow, northern New South Wales in 1982. Um, the resulting cultivar is known for its weeping habit and prolific pink flowers. That's the summary given to this particular plant. And I have to say, it is absolutely beautiful. I've got one planted at my front driveway, so it's the first one of the first plants you see when you drive in on the right-hand side. And I think it's pretty tough. It does love full sun. It does love moist soil, but it also has to be well drained. So it can't live in a boggy soil that's wet all the time. And in a really dry situation, again, this cultivar doesn't seem to do too well. It does prefer a fair amount of moisture during the dry period. So if you are going through a bit of a drought or a dry period, make sure you irrigate it and water it. In my situation, I'm in a fairly high irrigation, a high rainfall area. So and it looks pretty good even without me giving it any extra watering. So it does, just be aware, it does need a little bit more extra watering compared to the perceived toughness of native plants. Yes, you can plant it in the garden and leave it alone, provided you have adequate rainfall per year. And that is the secret for one of the things. Now, flowering. It flowers far better if you give it full sun all year round. Simple story. It will be more tight, it will be more compact. The chlorophyll in the leaves will be a darker green, which means it feeds the generation of the buds and the flowers. So the more sun you give it, the more flowers it will get. It's simple maths here, folks. Gardeners, just follow that simple process, and you will, for most plants, get more flowers. Pruning can be problematic because for gardeners, we tend to prune if a plant is in the way, or we habitually walk around with secateurs and just trim everything we see. You do have to hold back with this particular one with pruning. I do recommend, and what I do, I try to prune in late spring, early summer, after most of the flowering period has finished. The plants are then going to be invigorated because of the temperatures to put on new growth. And that growth is what will mature through summer and will flower the very next season. So that's my recommendation through experience that I pass on to prune it after flowering, which is basically late spring. And you should have a wonderful display. Just this plant is full. It's got buds that have opened, buds that are opening, and buds that are yet to open. It is a beautiful plant. And this one I did get from a nursery that was growing them, grown in full sun. As I said, that is the secret for optimum floral display. Now, fertilizers. Yes, it is a native plant. We regard it as a native plant, but you do not need to use native fertilizer. In fact, this one will benefit from generic fertilizers you use, but don't use too much. We do want growth, and most fertilizers will stimulate good growth. But if you give it too much nitrogen based fertilizers, you'll get excessive foliage growth, not really strong stems, and maybe not that much flowers the next season. So, rule of thumb, supply less rather than more. Treat it a little bit tough in terms of nutrient, and it will provide more flowers. I remember going through college and them saying, you know, beat your tree with a hammer or whacker and then it'll flower better. And the principle behind that is that the damage done to the trunk, it kind of limits the xylem and the phloem flow up the particular trunk in the tree. So the top part of the tree thinks it's going to die, and it tends to put more hormonal stress and incentive into the tissue above where the damage happened to think it's about to die. I need to flower to create the next generation. Now, we don't want to bash our trees or our shrubs at home, but we don't also want to overfeed them to make them soft. We want to toughen them up a little bit so that they feel the normal environmental fluctuations, a little bit of dry, a little bit of, oh, yep, I'm back. I think my internet just buffered. Internet is unstable. Looks like we're trying. Oh, yep, we are back again. There was a little bit of an internet connection there. Sorry, folks. Welcome to Australia. um, so yeah, with pruning and stress, think about how these plants react naturally in nature. They go through periods of dry, they go through periods of wet. If we try to mimic nature, we will get the best out of the plant. We can improve the results by our cultivation of these particular plants, by selective pruning, by selective cultivation of the soil, by controlling the nutrients for this particular plant and giving it the right nutrient to optimize growth and maximize the flowers. And you will get a stunning display. I love this for when it flowers. But that said, I have a lot of the white flowering form as well because I think the the pollinators prefer the white. I might be wrong here, but it's just my observation. Now, in terms of pollination and pollinators, these are massive attractants to the honeybees, the native bees, to the native butterflies, and other pollinators. I usually see these things swarming with a complete plethora of different insects, and it is great to see these in the garden. I've also got a few neighbors who have beehives, which is honey production. And of course, I grow a lot of these type of plants specifically for that honey production for some of my neighbors. I mean, obviously, I grow them for the flowers and for the insects in my yard, but he gets the benefit of the honey. And of course, I get some of that honey too. Okay. One of the things about this plant I do want to mention, and because one of its parents is the Manuka plant. Now, in New Zealand, the Manuka plant is Leptospermum scoparium, and that plant has specific characteristics, which is MgO. Let me just, I wrote it down. It's methyl glycoxyl, methyl glyoxyl. That's it, and leptospirin. So those compounds are very specific in the Manuka honey. However, our native Leptospermum polygallifolium, which is one of the parents of these, which we commonly call the jelly bush here in Australia, also known as the narrow-leaf tea tree, that also has the exact chemical, but I think there's just a few variations in the molecule structure, which means the honey from our native jellybush plant has the same antibacterial activities and the benefits similar to the Manuka honey. And I do know that there are quite a number of small bee honey farms around here or in Queensland and in New South Wales that are trying to grow more of the Leptospermum polygallifolium in order to create the Australian equivalent of Manuka. Now, I believe Manuka honey is a marketed trade name, so they have to come up with a different name. But in truth, I encourage people to grow Leptospermum polygallifolium and its cultivars, its varieties, to improve the honey quality here in Australia. And if you use some of the hybrids between Scoparium and Polygallifolium, you get the best of both worlds. So definitely, it's worth growing for the pollinators and the antibacterial properties of the honey itself. Now, some of the other reasons I love this plant, it's a great filler in the landscape. Councils use it because it's tough as nails and it ticks the box being native. Although it is a cultivar, I think that's still allowed. Um, and it's just a nice addition to the garden. Quite often in Australia, we see a lot of the plants focusing on yellow or white flowers. We have blue, but not that many, and pink tends to be overlooked quite often. But this is a show pony in the garden. It really does look absolutely fantastic. The marketing name is Leptospermum Pink Cascade. It is worth looking for in your local garden centre. And that's the main feature plant for today. But because this is a live podcast and I do record and upload it for post watching, I've got a couple of questions which came in, and one is from Cheryl, who, let me just read this to you. I harvested bananas off my tree recently. What do I do with the tree now? Well, thank you for the text, Cheryl. So, with bananas, the main stalk, the pseudostem, only flowers, produces fruit once. So, you have the option of leaving the main banana plant up there to still photosynthesize, but you'll notice at the base it should be producing some pups. And what we want to do is to encourage the pups to grow for the fruit for the next season. And you can cut that center one that's already fruited, you can cut it almost down to the ground level. And that is what farmers do on banana plantations. So sometimes they'll cut it immediately at the time of harvesting the fruit, and sometimes they will leave it a little bit longer to do that photosynthetic job to assist the new pup to grow a little bit stronger. So your choice, what you want to do with that. If you've got the space, leave it there because it gives that tropical lush foliage of the banana plant there. But if you are short of space and you would prefer the plant to put more energy in the new banana plant that's being produced, definitely yes, cut it down low, probably knee height or lower, and you'll see all of the energy put into that new shoot as it comes up. Second question I got from Rob. No address, no idea where they're from. They could be local, they could be far away. I just don't know. And the question is from last week's video on Lamandra. So you can watch last week if you wish to catch up on all the information I talked about. What um, what to do with the spiky flower spike? Okay. Okay. The first thing to remember with the lamandra is the flowers. Some of the species are scented, so keep them flowering. And I think Lamandra longifolia has the best scent of those species. Some of them will produce a spike with the flowers that are the flowers are tiny, and the flower spike, which is a stalk with a couple of modified bracts attached to it, and so they stick out, and over time they can become a little bit spiky. So the species that don't become spiky, don't worry about those. So Lamandra hystrix and Lamandra longifolia are the ones that tend to be a little bit spiky. The longer you leave them on the plant, the firmer they become. So if you cut the flowers off early when they're still soft and green, you won't have a problem with any of the spikes. That's pretty much the solution. But in most cases, people leave them alone. They don't mind the flowers. Luckily, if you're growing Lamandra longifolia, you will get that scent permeating through the yard, which is definitely worth growing for that one reason. Besides the fact that Lamandras are great at soil stabilization, they're great for the wilderness in terms of the flowers, a good attractant for native pollinators. It's a habitat for butterfly larvae, so the caterpillars need some lamandras as part of their life cycle, and some of the berries are eaten by birds and other insects, other wildlife. So they have definitely a good function. I would recommend trying to keep them as long as you possibly can. But if you are concerned about the spiky flowers, cut them off early so you won't have that particular problem to worry about. They're the 2 questions. That's all. Um, Today's gonna be a short one, currently 17 minutes. It might end up being cut a little bit shorter. So I know some of the other videos I have done for part of the podcast here on subtropical gardening have been a bit shorter and longer, so I do hope you enjoy it. So please give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the podcast. Every Saturday, the objective is to release these round about between 7 and 7:30, the start time period, and then have them available afterwards. Um, my name is Paul Plant. I used to do radio programming and I still do some radio stations, but the main one I did is no longer running, which is why I'm doing this as a podcast so that you can get the information local for local gardeners in a subtropical gardening. So, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. It's time for me to tune out, and I will see you next week.